Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Education Forum for the Islip and surrounding communities. Before we begin, I would like to thank the Bayway Art Center for generously donating their space to the parents. We so deeply appreciate it. In case of an emergency, exits are located at either side of the stage, to the right and to the left, but the exits in the back are to be used for normal purposes. So it all began for me less than a year ago when a news article prompted me to take a closer look at the new educational reform being implemented all over the country called Common Core. Once I began reading about it, I never stopped. And then I was prompted to ask more questions and seek a deeper understanding about what Common Core was and how it came about. As I gathered information, I began speaking to other parents that I knew, educators that I knew, and tried to open up dialogue and communication. I photocopied articles and passed them out on the bus at the bus stop, and asked the people that I spoke to research and gather information as well. Each of us here tonight knows varying degrees about the Common Core. We have a knowledgeable and wonderful panel of education activists here to speak and present tonight, which will hopefully lead you into further involvement in education and activism for the future of our children, our educators, our schools, and our community. Our first speaker is the co-founder of Stop Common Core New York State, along with Glenn Denglish. More importantly, she's a parent. Please welcome Yvonne Gasparino from Stop Common Core New York State.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Danielle, for inviting me to speak. I'm just going to get right down to it about what is Common Core. Common Core is a top-down, national mandated education program where 45 states needed to commit to adopt to the Race to the Top competitive grant program. So the Race to the Top competitive grant program started out in 2009 through the stimulus bill, the American Reinvestment Recovery Act. Out of that, $4.35 billion was allocated for the Race to the Top competitive grant program. Now, there's two things about the Race to the Top. States who signed on, whether they received money or not, they needed to sign on to standards, and then the SLDS. At the time, the standards were not written whatsoever. The first phase of Race to the Top was in November 2009. At that time, our legislators are not in office, and they gave a 2-month deadline to sign on. So at the time, our state officials had to decide, without consulting our legislators, to an unfunded, untested mandate, basically signing a blank page because the standards were not written yet. Another one of the requirements was an SLDS, a statewide longitude database system, which is essentially a national de facto database on children who attend school K through 12. Common Core state standards is a one-size-fits-all education, makes no distinction with the individual child. All children learn the same concepts at the same time, not taking into the individual development of the child or even language differences. Out of the $4.35 billion that was benchmarked, we have two national testing consortiums, PARC and SBAC. Out of that money, they were given $360 million. New York is part of PARC. And like I said, for our friends up north in Connecticut, they received no money. They still needed to sign on to the standards and to the SLDS. The testing is now secret, and it's provided by PARC, and no one sees the tests whatsoever, funded by the federal government. So, what are the Common Core state standards? Who created them? They were created by the National Governors Association, the NGA, and the Council of Chief State School Officers, I still mess up on that, CCSSO, who formed together the Common Core State Standards Initiative. Now, Common Core State Standards Initiative only encompasses ELA and math, nothing else. There are a set of standards where all children must learn the same thing at the same time. The initiative was not state-driven, as it was claimed to be by the NGA and the CCSSO. There are two Washington, D.C.-based trade organizations, neither of which who had any authority to write national standards. In fact, not all governors are part of the NGA. Achieve Inc. is the primary company who was responsible for Common Core state standards. It's a not-for-profit education company that assists in writing educational programs. You're going to hear Bill and Melinda Gates a lot throughout here. They gave $100 million to write the Common Core state standards. Now, what I find interesting is that there were only 5 architects, 5 main lead writers who wrote the Common Core state standards for 74 million school children. And those 5 lead architects were David Coleman and Jason Zimba, both of which who have no experience writing any standards whatsoever or any real-time classroom experience. And then you have Sue Pimentel, William McCallum, and Phil Darrow. So again, 5 people wrote standards for 74 million children. The standards are copyrighted, which is very important because it does not give our teachers any flexibility to incorporate their own style of how they want to manage their classroom. Last spring, the corestandards.org website had mentioned that they were internationally benchmarked. Well, they were never internationally benchmarked at all. There was no empirical evidence whatsoever to back the Common Core state standards up. In fact, they've never even been tested. So they were forced to take them off their website, and now they say they're relevant to the world. So you have 5 main points for the concerning Common Core state standards. One is the data mining, which is a huge, huge problem with a lot of parents, not only statewide but nationwide. Our children's personal information are being harvested by third parties without our consent or knowledge. Then you have your rights as a parent. They're being stripped because parents had no input into these standards whatsoever, nothing. Then you have the loss of local control. As you know, education should come at a state and local level. It should go no further than that. It should not go to federal. So your school tax dollars are no longer being used at a state and local level. They're being used at a federal level for an untested, unproven mandate for an unknown price tag. We do not know how much this is going to cost. Then you have the standardized tests, the bubble tests, which determine our children's which track they're going to take. Now, if Johnny wants to be an engineer and his math scores are not that good, they're going to push him in a different track. That's no one's decision except Johnny, who wants to be an engineer. Instead of getting him remedial help in math, perhaps to bring up his math scores, they're going to push him in a different track according to his test scores. I'm going to go into the data mining a little bit, the P20 coordination. How many people here know what P20 is? Okay. P20 is preschool through 20 years old. That is how long they want to track your children or your grandchildren. There's an actual page from the New York State Race to the Top selection criteria and competition priorities. It's on our website. You can actually look on page 247, and it actually describes P20, preschool through 20 years old. Now, my husband and I, we work with a lot of administrators nationwide as well. And we've been hearing actually P20 is prenatal through 20 years old. Out in Oregon, our friends in Oregon, there is a YouTube video by Deputy Superintendent Rob Saxton. I urge you to look it up. And it's Oregon Deputy Superintendent Rob Saxton, all your kids belong to us. And that's where he mentions from prenatal to 20 years old. So what kind of information is being harvested? You have voting status, you have family income, you have dwelling ownership, whether you own or rent a house, bus stop arrivals, your child's disciplinary records, medical information, religious affiliation. All this information that should be private is no longer private. Not only is it an intrusion on your child, it's an intrusion on your family life as well. A couple months ago, I was invited, my husband and I were invited to a seminar out in Dallas, a 3-day seminar to stop Common Core in New York State, in New York. And one of the questions was, how many data points does it take to pinpoint a child's identity? Does anyone know? Just 8. Well, 7. So in New York State, they want to harvest over 400 data points, over 400 data points on your child. It only takes 7 data points to pinpoint a child's identity. So think about all the information that you can get with 400 data points. How are we doing this? How is this possible? Well, this is possible by InBloom. InBloom is a company that's been contracted out by NICED. InBloom is a not-for-profit organization. It was a joint project funded by, again, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You're going to hear their name throughout this whole Common Core state standards. They were given more money by the Bill and Melinda Gates, $100 million, as well as the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Amplify Education was a division of the Rupert Murdoch. So Rupert Murdoch also has his hands in this as well. He created the infrastructure for InBloom. Now, a while back, there were several states that were signed on to use InBloom for for the students' information. There was Delaware, Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, North Carolina. There was a lot of pushback last spring with parents, and a lot of the states decided, no, we're not going to do it anymore, leaving only New York and Illinois, and recently Colorado just backed out. There was one county that had a pilot program, Jefferson County, which is no longer, they pulled out, and it only leaves New York and Illinois. And I believe Illinois is actually, it's voluntary. New York is mandatory, and New York is the worst state in the union when it comes to student privacy, the worst. So while InBloom is busy harvesting your child's information, they have decided to incorporate a breach remediation policy, resolving them of all liability if the personal information is breached. And I quote on InBloom's website, "We cannot guarantee the information in InBloom or that the information will not be intercepted when it's being transmitted." That's your personal information for your child. How many people here actually check to see if their children's identity has ever been stolen? Does that ever occur to you? No. And just recently in Sachem, what did we have? We had a security breach. So InBloom can't guarantee this information is not going to be intercepted. Just recently in November, there's been a lawsuit filed by a group of New York State parents in New York City regarding the data mining, and they have a restraining order against InBloom. What I suggest you do to get more information, ClassSizeMatters.org is a great website by Leonie Hamerson. She's fantastic. She has a lot of information on InBloom. And that is a good website to go to. Now, I want to go through some of the devices that have been proposed by the U.S. Department of Education. And I hesitate because these devices are pressure mouse pads and posture analysis seats and facial expression cameras, and it sounds very Orwellian. It really does. Just the mere fact that these devices are on the United States Department of Education should be a trouble for every parent. Every parent should be troubled by this. Just the mere thought that they're even thinking of it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's on there on page 44 for promoting grit, tenacity, and perseverance, critical factors for success in the 21st century on page 44. I urge you to go there and check it out, and it will make you wake up. Our children are not test subjects. They're not guinea pigs, and they shouldn't be treated as such. Now, aren't our privacy rights supposed to be protected by FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974, where that affords your child's privacy in school? Well, it was until it was gutted in 2011 by the current administration. It was done via executive order, and it was implemented in January of 2012 without any congressional oversight. We now have primarily a national de facto database on children, is what we have now. This was done legally because they needed to gut FERPA because it would be against the law if they did not. They would not be able to harvest the information. So FERPA now, quote, states, schools do not need any parental consent to share student records with any school official who has a legitimate educational interest. USDE defines school official to include private companies, third parties, hired by the school, as long as the data is only used for what the contract deems. How do we know what the contract deems? I don't. Does anyone else know what the contract deems? What information they're going to give away? So it's not only information on your children, but also your family as well. The old FERPA law, children from 0 to 6 were protected. They're no longer protected now. They're fair game. The diminishing of parental rights. So you have unaccountable outsiders who are controlling the curriculum. You have Achieve, you have the National Governors Association, you have the CCSSO, the Council of Chief State and School Officers, Pearson. The school administrators, the board members, and teachers, they have no ability to change the standards whatsoever because they're copyrighted. So their hands are tied, especially our teachers. Our teachers' hands are literally tied. They no longer have the creativity they once had in the classroom under Common Core state standards, or as John King likes to put, Common Core learning standards. Same thing. Our teachers' ability and creativity to teach, they've been decimated. Our teachers have been virtually handcuffed and pushed unwillingly into the solitary confinement by this national centralized education that's a mandate. Our school districts, our board members, their roles and responsibilities helping to assist our children's education has been reduced dramatically. Your rights as a parent have also been diminished. Where are you going to go when you have questions to the standards? Are we going to call up Achieve or NGA or CCS? Who are we going to call? There was a great article in the New York Times this past summer. Who's minding the schools? I'm going to say it once. I don't have my slides, but I have this great visual here of an empty board meeting with empty chairs, no phone, return to sender. Here's a quote. For all its impact, the Common Core is essentially an invisible empire. It doesn't have a public office, a board of directors, or a salaried staff. Its website lists neither a postal address nor a telephone number. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So we're going to get to the real cost of how much this is costing us. We're going to try to at least. New York State was awarded $700 million in Phase 2. We didn't win any money in Phase 1. Phase 2 came in April, and June 1st was the deadline. By the way, the standards came out finally June 2nd of 2010. So New York received $700 million and another $150 million. Not all that, we don't get all that money at once. It comes in increments in 4 years. So the race to the top, the total cost, there's only one cost analysis that's been done that I know of so far by Henry W. Burke in conjunction with Pioneer Institute. The total cost for Common Core state standards to be implemented in the state of New York is $1.1 billion, leaving a gap of $250 million. Where is that money going to come from? And what I want to know is why hasn't Governor Cuomo, how come he hasn't prepared an official cost analysis? Nothing. He's been in state now for 3 years. Governor Patterson signed the MOU originally for Common Core state standards in 2010, but Governor Cuomo was elected into office into 2011. Yes. So it's been 3 years now, and there's still no official cost analysis from our governor. Nothing at all. The race to the top funding for those school districts who did receive money, any money that's not spent goes back to the U.S. Department of Treasury by September 30th, 2015. I looked up the funds for Islip. We received $23,000, not much. So Islip School District received $23,000. Now we have to think about the cost to implement the infrastructure, to manage it, Common Core state standards, since all the tests are going to be done, are targeted to be online for 2014, 2015. How much is that going to cost? The IT personnel to support the infrastructure, the supporting contracts, how are they going to be paid for? The computer per student, tablets per student. These are just some of the questions to ask your school board and to press on them. How are we going to raise the money for this? We can only surmise that your school taxes are going to go up to accommodate the new equipment and the testing online. Once again, for an unfunded, unproven mandate with an unknown price tag. My personal taxes went up this year over 2%, just in 1 year. The loss of local control is a huge issue as well, because the assessments are now done at a national level when you have lost your local control. The assessments by Park drive the tests, which dictate the curriculum. Again, Park creates the assessments which are aligned to the Common Core state standards, which drive the curriculum. It doesn't matter that NICEAD changed the name to Common Core Learning Standards. It's all still the same, all smoke and mirrors, different packaging, same outcome is control. Again, the standards are copyrighted, but they do give you a 15% leeway for teachers to have be creative within their classroom. But don't think that 15%, your child's going to be tested on that 15%. They're not going to be tested on that 15%. It's not a lot when you think about the school taxes that you pay for. We're essentially have education without representation. That's what Common Core is. Our teachers are reduced to educational facilitators. The modulars are giving modulars and scripts. It depends on the school district. Where I live over in Portchester, New York, they literally go word for word for word at the modulars. My best friend's daughter, her math book says Common Core Engage New York on it. It's just plain white math book. Where you have some school districts that don't go by the modulars. It's very inconsistent right now. But right now, the teacher frustration is at an all-time high. I'm sure if you get to talk to your teacher off the cuff, off the schoolyard, I'm sure they'll tell you that their frustration level is high. They went to school for a reason. They went to school because they have the love of teaching. They want to teach. They didn't go to become a teacher so their hands can be tied and lose their creativity in the classroom. The testing and the assessments. So why are the tests cloaked in secrecy? Both teachers and parents have no access to them without the FOIA. In order to see a test, you need to fill out a Freedom of Information Act. And not all requests are approved. I know there was some parents in Long Island who were denied access to see their child's test. If they're so good, why all the secrecy? Why are teachers not allowed to review these assessments? Why are they under lock and key? And as you know, I don't know, well maybe not, the assessments are tied directly to the teacher's APPR, the Annual Personal Performance Review. I don't know if everyone is aware or not, but they are, which creates the atmosphere of teaching to the test. because then now teachers are put under the microscope. Our children are not a commodity, our human capital. That's how David Coleman likes to describe our children, as human capital. They're not to be bought and sold on the open market to the highest bidder. Those who make money off of Common Core do not have the ownership or have the ownership of the minds of our children. These field tests that our children take have no bearing on their grades, nothing whatsoever. Our children are being used with these field tests. And you do not have to take them. This past spring in New York City, the New York City children were forced to take these assessments, and the teachers' training for it they received inadequate training, and the results were abysmal. They were just horrible. Bottom line about Common Core, our children's future are more than what the standardized test results indicate. Our children are more than test scores. There are more ways to gauge your child, how your child learns. When you have a question about your children, where do you go? You go to your teacher. The teachers are the ones who are in the classroom with our children 5 days a week, several hours a day. They know our children's weaknesses and strengths as well. This education model was imported from Europe. Okay? It was imported by Sir Michael Barber. I don't know if you're aware of the book he wrote, Deliverology, but he wrote an open call to all education reformers, and this education model is based on his book. You have, when it comes to Common Core, we have gifted children, we have special needs children, all different types of children. With regards to our special education children, I have many friends with IEPs. I'm sure we all know what IEPs are, individual education program. They can be anywhere from 7 pages to 20 pages, depending upon the child's needs and challenges. When we first looked up to see what the Core Standards Org, what they did for the special education children, less than 2 pages. Less than 2 pages. Applications to students with disabilities were less than 2 pages long. They were an afterthought. They were completely thrown off the bus. Our children, all our children are like flowers, is how I like to describe them. Some flowers need direct sunlight, some need shade, some need to be watered every day and nurtured every day, while some you only need to water a little bit, depending upon the flower, and that's what our children are like. They're all different shapes and sizes. Common Core State Standards was not developed by educators, parents, or local school boards. It was developed by Achieve Inc., branded by 2 trade organizations. When you actually look on the work groups, when you do your homework, and you look to see who the work groups are who formed Common Core State Standards Initiative, you're going to see Achieve, you're going to see ACT, you're going to see America's Choice, you're going to see Student Achievement Partners. These are all educrats who want to make a buck off our children. I want to make a point to the Student Achievement Partners, which is owned by David Coleman and Susan Pimentel. What we found out about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, Student Achievement Partners is in charge of Engage New York Modulars, by the way. They are managing the RFPs, requests for proposals. So that's pretty big. That was a new discovery that one of the members found out who emailed me. So Student Achievement Partners has their hands in Engage New York Modulars. With regards to the validation committee, Dr. James Milgram, we recently had a conference call with him. I don't know if anyone had a chance to go and listen to him, but he was the only mathematician on the validation committee. He sent me this long email because I had looked up some of the work groups, and I saw a mathematician, I saw all these names, and he explained to me what a real mathematician is. I wish I can remember his response, but it's so long and detailed. I will, it's up on our website. But he was the only mathematician on the validation committee, and he refused to sign off on the standards at all. He said he refused to sign off on the standards. Doing so would have required him to assert that they reflected international expectations for math, but they are considerably below that level, Dr. James Milgram. Another professor who refused to sign off was Dr. Sandra Stotsky. She calls them an empty skill set. And she travels from state to state to state, testifying, working night and day to help get rid of Common Core state standards. There was an article in the Washington Times recently by Valerie Strauss, and it was about Bill Gates talking about Common Core state standards. And his quote was, "We don't know if it's going to work." Really? You don't know if Common Core standards is going to work, so then why are we adopting it? Why are we going full strength with it when there's no evidence to back it up? All the money, all the children who are getting hurt by Common Core state standards, and there's frustration with the teachers, and he doesn't know if it's going to work. Our children are not test subjects, and they shouldn't be treated like rats in a lab. Common Core state standards was done in the dead of the night, and it's been in your schools now for about 2 years. I hope you truly get informed to really peel the layers away of Common Core state standards, because it looks very innocuous. It looks like a great program, but when you peel away the layers, it's something else. It's completely something else. There's so many things you can do to stop Common Core. We have Facebook, Stop Common Core in New York State, our website, stopcommoncorennewyork.com. And there's a 5-part video series. That's one of my Common Core 101 Bibles, I'd like to say, because that gives a detailed foundation of what Common Core state standards is. It takes less than 30 minutes to watch. It's by Jane Robbins, by the American Principles Project, and that's a video that I even watch over and over and over again, because it's just so much information. Then we have the bill that Assemblyman Graff did that we constantly push, A07994. And his petition. We hit the 20,000 mark. I texted Monday morning, we hit 20,000. We want more numbers, 25,000. Get out there, get informed, speak to your colleagues, speak to your friends. Have forums like Danielle put together here to inform your neighbors, your relatives, friends. Just keep on talking and educating yourself. Mobilize groups, get together, have meetings. We can get this done. This is like a David and Goliath story is what it is. This is truly a grassroots effort run by moms, dads, and teachers. We have almost 8,000 people with our Stop Common Core in New York State. We started out with 3 counties. And the premise was to get all counties on board and to get them mobilized individually, and they take the ball and they run with it. And believe me, we have some fabulous members who are taking the ball and running with it, and they're doing presentations. They're going from county to county, from town to town. Steuben County is very active, Monroe County is very active, Nassau and Suffolk County is very active. So I urge everyone to really get involved. This is our children's education that we're talking about, and their educational freedom. And I hope tonight that I was able to give you a little bit more information on the overview of Common Core state standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you for coming from Portchester tonight, and we appreciate everything that you're doing. Our next speaker is Professor Arnold Dodge from Long Island University. Professor Dodge has given testimony at Senate hearings, and I'm very grateful and honored that he could be with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Danielle, and thank you for inviting me this evening. And for those of you who are interested, at the end of the evening, I can give you the name of a good prenatal tutor. I've been on the circuit with a few people doing this thing. Dr. Rella being one of them, Jeanette Dudeman being another. I was just in Glen Cove last night with Jeanette to a really wonderfully inspiring crowd. And what I'm finding is that the more and more parents get involved in this, the more inspired I get, because I think this is what democracy looks like. This means that people are saying, listen, you know, you really can't do things to us that we don't like, because if we come out in numbers, we can say to you folks who we've elected, and we can say to you folks who have a lot of money, and you folks who think you have the power, no, we have the power because we are the people. And I think it's important that this wave continues, and I'm feeling that we're reaching a real tipping point now because of the number of parents who are out to these meetings and have become interested across New York and across the country, because I am in touch with my colleagues across the country. So just briefly, I've been in this business for 44 years. I've been a teacher, and I've been a curriculum director, I've been a principal, and I have been a superintendent. And in the last 7 years, I've been associated with LIU Post as the director and chair of a Department of Education Leadership, where we train future principals. So I've been marinating in education my entire adult life, and I'm disgusted. I have never seen such a disregard for my profession by the policymakers and the people who know nothing about my job and the things that I've done and I've devoted myself to, and it's an insult. And as I think about the last number of years and the insults after insults that I've felt and that my colleagues have felt, one comes to mind in particular when Michael Bloomberg named a magazine editor to be chancellor of the state, of the largest city school system in the country. So I wrote Michael Bloomberg a letter and I asked him if I could be police commissioner. because I never had a speeding ticket in the last 10 years, and although I don't own a gun, I've seen people who in movies who use guns. I said, it seems that's about as much credentials as you need to be one of your commissioners. Never answered me. So I take this thing very seriously. So much so that in the last number of years, when people push at me and say, how come you can't be more like Finland? Well, you know, I went to Finland schools because I got sick and tired of it. I went with an American delegation. So we went to the Finnish teachers and we said, what's the magic? And they said, well, you people from America stop asking us what the magic is. There is no magic. We just teach and they leave us alone. And there's no standardized tests, and they give us a very thin curriculum, and they say, go ahead, we trust you. And I asked the principal, how often do you get tapped by the central office? He said, well, twice a year we might meet with them, but otherwise they just leave us alone because they respect us. It's one of the most respected professions in the country. In addition, and this, I call this comparing apples to reindeer, because in addition, Finland has 4.5 million people. Well, you know, I grew up in Brooklyn. There were 4.5 million people on my block. And to compare a 300 million populated country like ours, with the vastness of our diversity and, unfortunately, the depths of our poverty, to a place that has 4% poverty, no standardized tests, 4.5 million people, an extremely homogeneous society, that's why Finland does better. I went into the classrooms, both in the United States and in Finland, and I can tell you, our schools are as good in most cases, or better. But it's the society that stinks. And when a society stinks because it doesn't take care of its people, and when a society stinks because it doesn't honor its teachers, this is what you get. So all of this is a smokescreen, because I believe that the people in power don't want to deal with the real issues, which are the disparities in wealth, the fact that certain communities cannot do well no matter how many times you test kids. They have this idea that if we just keep testing them, eventually they're going to get it. Well, that's the definition of insanity. You keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. And these people are insane, I've convinced myself. Either that, or they're so short-sighted, or they don't believe in the public enough that we will rise up, and we are, in saying, enough, that's it, and we've had it. And in terms of another country, because I have made it a point to travel, I'm also sick and tired of people saying, well, you know, China's eating our lunch. So I went to China, and I went with a delegation, and we visited schools, and we saw all kinds of things in China. And one of the things we saw are people telling us, we got too much competition. There are too many tests in China. We're going to try to be more like America, because they didn't get the memo yet that we are trying to be more like China. So the insanity is we're trying to be more like a country that's trying to be more like we were, which makes no sense. And here, let me pass a comment about my friend Bill Gates, who is public enemy number one to me. And I recommend a piece by Susan Ohanian called The Gates of Hell. I think you can Google it, where she's made it her mission to examine the work that he's done. Aside from the fact that he's a philanthropist and maybe he's not self-serving, that sounds like a ridiculous statement, but let's even give that to him. The fact is he knows nothing about education, but yet he continues to trot out his version of what education should be. So two quick stories, one that deals with Shanghai. I went to the schools in Shanghai, and fast forward, a few months ago I was at a meeting, Bill Gates was in the room, and my wife luckily held me down because I was going to jump on the stage and start yelling at him, because he puts up on a slide, look at the scores in Shanghai. How can we should be ashamed of ourselves. My words, not his, but that his message. We should be ashamed of ourselves. Well, you know what? I went to the schools in Shanghai. Shanghai is Beverly Hills underwater. It's one of the most exclusive areas in China, and they target kids who take their tests, and they do not permit kids who don't do well to take the test. And he has the nerve to and his people know very well that is a bogus, fraudulent statistic, but it sounds ugly, so it gets Americans riled up, and they say, oh, we better have more race to the top, because we gotta... So the whole thing is based on mythology and fraud, and it's being promulgated by people who have big names, and we've got to stop those people and say, stand up at a meeting and say, this is fraud, this is a myth, and I'm not going to take it. Because these people really have decided that, as Yvonne so eloquently states, they've decided on this is the path that we're going to take, the wealthy, the influential, and that's the way it's going to be. Too bad, public school people, because we know better. So I want to just talk a minute, and then I'll turn the mic over, because I have to leave, unfortunately, tonight. I wish I could stay, but I want to get in a couple of other comments. Talk about things that are developmentally inappropriate. I spent my entire career making sure that either as a teacher or as an administrator, I was monitoring for developmentally appropriate education. Okay, so you don't give a 5-year-old academics with no recess, and I will tell you, across the country, they are either eliminating or reducing recess so the kids can get prepared to take the test. How stupid can you be, even if you know nothing about education, even if you looked at a 5-year-old for 5 minutes, you realize they're not going to pay attention unless they've got downtime. So to say to them, sit there and take the test, even if you believed in the test, you're not going to get good results. So they're shooting themselves in the foot with their policies. And then I will tell you, I was a junior high school principal. When you're 12 years old, your blood travels from the neck down, okay? I insisted that my teachers not make high stakes an environment for 12 and 13 years old, because they are emotional creatures, they are physical creatures, and that's the way it should be. So to test them and say, sit there and pay attention with the cognitive part of your body, which is really not tuned up yet, makes no sense at all. So when you look at developmentally appropriate kinds of things, it's all backwards. Let's talk about stress for a minute. There is an iconic curve called the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and it's a very simple curve. It sounds, if you look it up, there are a lot of statistical evidence behind it, but it's a very simple concept. And it goes something like this. If you want somebody to pay attention, a child to pay attention, you need to get them aroused, which means you need to get them to say, this is interesting. You need to get them engaged. And the curve goes like this. It goes up, 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 arousal, arousal, and you hit a sweet spot where the kid's really paying attention, and you know what happens to performance? Performance goes up. But if you push that too far, you get to the anxiety level. And what happens to the contact with the information? It plummets. When you've got anxiety-ridden 3rd graders and 5th graders and 7th graders, you won't get the best out of them. What you get is a kid who is starved for some kind of nurturance, and instead you double down and you say, we're going to make it even worse. and you will not get the stable, reliable results that we count on for our kids. So the entire thing, from a psychometric standpoint, makes no sense. So as I look at point after point after point about this paradigm and this juggernaut, it is flawed on every single level. And I have been talking about this, quite frankly, since 2002, when George Bush said, "Is our children learning?" Which was really inspiring for me to hear our president say, and thereby launched No Child Left Behind. And I stood up at a meeting in 2002, and I said to the educators in the room, we better watch out. And somebody said, sit down, this will blow over. Well, here we are 12 years later, and now we've got a program that's No Child Left Behind on steroids, and it's also got money and blackmail attached to it. You don't do it our way, you're going to have a problem. So all of this is designed to pressure you, to pressure the parents, and to say, you better listen to what we say. We're going to take away your money. We'll take away your status. We won't do well in the world. And if you hit every one of those notes, you will realize they are fraud. This is all smoke and mirrors. And we have to blow away the smoke, see it for what it is, and tell those people to sit down, because the adults are going to stand up and take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dodge, for coming out tonight. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Joseph Rella, Superintendent of Comsquad School District. Dr. Rella is a true leader among administrators here on Long Island, and we can only hope in Islip that other administrators join him in this fight. Dr. Rella.
A couple of things I can't do. I'm Italian descent. I have to move around a little bit. My hands especially. The microphone's just going to be too problematic. Can you hear me in the back? Is this good? Yeah. I should be able to project. I'm proud to be part of the panel tonight. These are fierce advocates for our students. What got me involved in this, I was taking a ride out to a BOCES meeting in Riverhead at the beginning of August, this past August. And the commissioner got on the radio and said that the state would be releasing the test scores of the prior April's grade 3 through 8 ELA, English and math tests. And that the results weren't good. As he had predicted back in January prior, it was amazing to me, 70% of the students failed the test. And that prediction was made by not only the commissioner, but by a deputy commissioner as well in March. Only about a third of the students they expected to pass. Now imagine being the coach of a team. You got up at the beginning of the season and said, I only expect us to win a third of the games. You'd be fired. The teacher came to me and said, I designed the test that 70% of the kids are going to fail. I'd say, well, don't give the test. And she said, no, I really think it's important that I do. Well, let's take a walk out to the car. You have a career, but it's not going to be here. Nevertheless, they plowed ahead with this, and the words that disturbed me more than anything else was that these tests were going to be predictors of college success in college. Now, every year when those test scores go home, I write a letter that go home with them. I didn't know how I was going to tell a third grader, because 70% of my third graders failed. Don't bother showing up for the next 9 years. You're not college material. I didn't know what it was going to do to them. And at least up until that point, the state was just messing around with adults. It goes with the territory. You're an adult. You take it. You do what you have to do. But now children were going to be hurt. And that was the end of the conversation for me. I didn't care about Common Core after that. I didn't care how good it was, if I was going to fix everything. Any test that's designed for 70% of the students taking it to fail, that's designed that way, is abusive. So I wrote a couple of letters to my state senators, and we have two in Council, not that we're that big, but that the district is divided that way, and to our assemblyman. And I said, look, there's a lot of problems with what's going on. The biggest problem is that this, to me, and it's clear, so shake confidence in public education that the only alternative will be to privatize for profit. That's what this is about. Why is it being done? Follow the money. There's nothing good about this, okay? And you say, well, there were good points. Now let's make believe let's switch over to medicine for a second. And let's say I had a cure. I had a pill that was going to fix. Everybody would be healthy. Okay? And I had a trial run of this pill in April. And 70% of the people who took it died. Would we be debating, well, parts of it are good? Would we really? No, we would not. No, we would not. Since then, the State Education Department has put out a lot of information about the value of the test results, setting the bar higher, rigor. We've heard a lot about rigor. I always think of funeral homes when I hear that. Raising the bar. Our students now finally had a chance to be college and career ready, whatever that means. You understand that there's nothing defined about this. It's slogans. College and career ready. Rigor. Okay? At the same time that this was going on, though, the outrage of parents and educators was growing. And it was growing exponentially. It has become more and more organized. It is more and more organized. It's unstoppable in my mind. Assemblyman Graff's bill got to be close to 21,000. Back in August, when I first met the Assemblyman, there weren't too many people that even heard about it. But it's growing all over the state. It's finding resonance. And I don't know if you noticed, but at the same time that the State Education Department has not been listening on the listening tour forums, Chancellor Tisch and Commissioner King have adopted a position publicly that they are not responsible for a lot that's wrong. The standards, well, the districts have had years to work with those. The curriculum, well, that's the district's choice. They don't have to use Engage New York. What's the alternative since you didn't give us time to write the curriculum? And that's what the tests are based on. The testing and the APPR, well, districts negotiated those plans with their unions. That has nothing to do with us. Data sharing, well, if districts don't share data, they're not going to be able to run. Governor Cuomo has stated that the commissioner doesn't report to him. He reports to the regions. And the regions don't report to him either. They're appointed by the legislature. Is anybody responsible for anything? Thank God Assemblyman Graff stood up and said, this is wrong. I'm taking responsibility for changing it, and he introduced the bill to do just that. Today we had a press conference in Brentwood. The chair of the Education Committee of the Senate, Senator Flanagan, I was waiting. I was hoping for a 7-course meal. I got a Ritz cracker today. Without any cheese on it, just a Ritz cracker. You can't tweak something that's toxic. This is toxic. It's hurting children. Now let me ask you a question. Why are you here tonight? Why? You've had enough. Who cares about you? Okay. What's happening with your kids? One of the things that Professor Dodge didn't talk about, and I heard him months ago talk about this, and it's stayed in my head since. Another place that he's worked is in East Africa, and he's worked with the Maasai people. And the Maasai have been doing the same things for a long, long time. They're semi-nomadic. You've seen them in the National Geographic special. They have cattle. They don't own anything. Everything's held in common. When they greet one another, the first question they ask is, and how are the children? And if the answer is, all of them are well, then they know things are okay in that village. They're very backward people, obviously. So I'm going to ask you, how are the children? Are all of them well? Okay. What are you prepared to do about it, I guess, is the next question. And you need to know that this may sound very dismal, but we are at a tipping point. You have more power than you can possibly imagine. When I put these letters up on our district website when I wrote them on a Thursday afternoon, and I went home. Who's going to look at a website the first week in August? 5 people? Well, Friday the office is closed in the summer, but I went in because it's quiet. I can get some stuff done. And the phone was ringing off the hook, and my cell phone's going bang, email after email. Something happened overnight. Now, I wasn't really involved with Facebook or any of these things. I was afraid of it a little bit. And somebody called me and said, it's all over Facebook, you know. I said, what's all over? Your letters. And I look at an email from a guy in New Hampshire, and he says, thank you for speaking for me. And I said, I'm not speaking for you, I don't even know you. But what I had said to the senators was, if you believe that this system is bad, then we need your help to stop it. If you believe that it's valid, then I have to be fired. Because in the 3 years I was superintendent, my test scores here of our children, grades 3 through 8, went from 90% proficient to 30% proficient. I wrecked the school system here. I meant it though. Both of us can't be okay. I can't be okay, and the system's okay. One of us is broken. And if it's not the system, it must be me. And I was told basically, have a nice weekend. Well, you can see, today was a Ritz cracker. But I don't know if you saw Channel 12, Roberta Gerald, who's the president of the Suffolk County School Superintendent, she said, look, no one's going to get excited about anything that was said today. But the good thing is, there are cracks now. Finally, somebody said, besides Al Graff, there's something wrong with this. Now, the solution, you can't just do little fixes on something that is horrible. It has to stop. And the slogan that we had in the summer is stop it, fix it. And if it can't be fixed, throw it out. But up until now, none of it has been given any real scrutiny by educators. None of it. There is no research connected with any of it. Because if you ask for the citation, it's not there. They don't give it to you. All the pieces of it are no good. You can start with the standards, developmentally inappropriate. You can go to the curriculum, Engage New York. That doesn't even match up. First of all, it's not complete, but that's just a small point. The other thing is that it doesn't even line up with the standards in many cases. All right, then the testing. Well, the purpose of giving a test is that we can figure out if we're teaching okay. You know, believe it or not, we did have teaching before this. We did have teachers were evaluated before this. All right. How many people here grew up in New York? How many people took Regents? You had to go see a shrink afterwards? Tests are part of school. But now, this is the central act of the school. And little children, and Mary will talk to you about it, little children are hurting themselves. I don't care how good let's make believe this thing was perfect. Let's make believe it was the best curriculum that ever, standards and curriculum was going to make us all the things they said it was. Given the destructive effects, it has to go. You can't debate it anymore. The debate ended for me. I know it's probably ignorant of me, but at that point I got nothing else to talk to you about. Kids are hurt. Stop it. There's no, and then you can spend as much time as you want looking at it. Knock yourself out looking at it. But not while children are still, because while we're sitting here, remember, your children and children all over New York State are struggling with things they don't understand how to do. Parents are struggling with it. We've taken the joy out of school for them. They come to school. And the other thing we've done is that we've convinced them, because they listen to us, we've convinced them that they're stupid. We've convinced them that they can't do it. They remember those things. I had a teacher in college, in graduate school, and she had an aunt who was 78 years old. She was going to that aunt's birthday party this one night. And I said, boy, that would be great. She says, yeah, but it's sad in a way. I said, what's the matter? And she said, well, she won't even sing happy birthday. I said, what happened to her? I thought something happened to her vocal voice. That's the only rate. He could talk, he could sing. She said, no, when she was in second grade, the spring concert, the teacher said to her as she was walking out, you can go out there, but just mouth the words, you can't sing. And you say, that teacher didn't mean to kill this person's life. She didn't want somebody singing loud the wrong notes. But that kid remembered that. That's how powerful those words are. Now imagine, year after year, that this child gets a 1. Now I can't even say to that child or to the parent, well, you're weak in these areas, we'll work on it. We don't get to see any of that. Not allowed. We're trusted, a teacher is trusted with 25 kids in a room and they can close the door. But not trusted with a test. This is almost like a Mel Brooks film, except it's a tragedy, not a comedy. Imagine an educational system run by non-educators whose job it is to hurt kids. That's what we have. It has to stop. It's going to stop. The thing that you need to do, if you don't know about it, inform yourself. Just what Yvonne said. There's a lot of information out there. Your voice is being heard. Many of the legislators, and our highest point of leverage is the legislature. You've got to get to your legislators here in East Islip. An email a day doesn't take more than seconds. Doesn't take time at all. This needs to stop. I'll be seeing how you respond. See you next November. Love and kisses. Okay? That has to happen. Don't leave it to somebody else. You got to talk to your neighbors. What's happening is, if you called a forum like this a year ago, nobody'd be here. The difference between last year and this year, last year was just the test, bad enough. This year is the curriculum. So it's every night. Before I came here tonight, a friend of mine in the district called me up and said, hey, I said, hey, how you been? He said, listen, he said, I haven't been involved in this whole Common Core thing. I said, it's okay. You know, he said, I got to get involved. Why? I'm going crazy. My kids are going crazy. So that's what's happening. If we could begin every conversation, and I intend to, with anybody from the state, I'm going to ask them, and how are the children? Are all of them? That's the other thing. Say?
Ask him how his bank account is.
Well, yeah. I think we already know the answer, though. I think we.
No, but nobody's saying it.
I know.
They should say it.
Look, if I knew, I'd be saying it. You got to know that.
Roy Jesse James, I tell him.
I got to tell you, when the money,
Money does.
Judge Louis Brandeis, Supreme Court Justice, said that the most effective disinfectant is sunlight. Once they turn the lights on this thing, then you see the trail. They're going to go running for the woodwork like cockroaches, because that's the only motivator. The last piece is, I'm telling you, you have tremendous power. Because until parents got involved in this thing, it didn't go anywhere. They weren't listening to the educators. They were not. They're still not. Use your power for the good. You know what's best for your child. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I'm not allowed to talk to you or tell you about opting out. All right? Because there is no provision in the law. It's not that it says you can't opt out. It says there's nothing there. Figure out why. Imagine you had a bunch of middle school kids, and I'm the teacher. And I say, listen, here's your final math. I'm opting out today. That's why there's no provision in the law. All right. But the Supreme Court of this country said that parents have the ultimate decision-making when it comes to their children. We've forgotten about the Constitution. All right? There's no provision in the Constitution that allows the federal government to make decisions for states and localities for education. None. Okay? So don't make if anybody tells you anything, so you're going to hear, well, if you opt out, your child is going to get special AIS services. Keep in mind, ask to see the AIS plan. There were 20 indicators before your child gets AIS, and a big piece of that is a parent input. Okay? Because if I want to give your child AIS, you say, no, I can fight it, but ultimately you have the decision. If I don't want to give it, you say, I want my child to have it, ultimately you're going to get it. Or you're going to hear the district will lose funds. 2 schools in my district last year didn't make the AYP because of participation. 95% had to participate. That's not in effect right now. There's a waiver. But But what happened to me this year as a result of 2 of my schools going down last year? Nothing. Nothing. I've heard of districts where parents are being told that they're going to call CPS on you. Tell them to call. Ask for the piece of paper that shows the regulation saying that. It doesn't exist. All right? That's what I'm saying. You have to inform yourselves. All right? Otherwise, rumor and myth and intimidation, because I got to tell you, they know that they're on the run now. So you're going to hear wackier and wackier things coming out. Ask for the piece of paper. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a state policy on sit and stare during the test?
I think you should go to jail if you do that to kids. That should be. There is no state policy.
What was that question? So they can remove the children from the class when they have to sit and stare.
What does that mean?
That's just.
There are some districts that when a child is not going to take the test, they force the child to sit in the room and stare. They can't read a book. They can't do anything for 2 or 3 hours. You should call CPS on that. All these things are going to happen. But in some districts, children, first of all, one of my principals today lives in another district, and he told his child's teacher, principal actually, that his child would not be sitting for the test in April. And he handed him a note, and the principal told him, another principal, he's a middle school principal with me, we don't accept notes.
Oh, really?
Absence notes, mission slips. So I get it. You're going to have a 3rd grader come in and say, I don't think I'm going to be eating lunch here today. I'm going to step out with my friends and go down to the pizza place. But you don't need to have any parent permission. And I'd like to go on that field trip with the 5th graders. I know it's not for me, but I'm interested in the zoo. All right. Ridiculous. Don't be bullied. Do not allow yourselves to be. Ask for the information. But first inform yourselves. There are websites, there are Facebook pages. I'm a big Facebooker now. Let me go to what happened. But there are websites and Facebook pages with a ton of reliable information. Triangulate. Get it from 2 or 3 sources so you know it's reliable. Okay? This is our children's future. They don't get a second chance with their childhood. They go through this once. We can't mess it up on them.
I just feel like we're all, like right now, I'm in Broadway. I work in the Broadway School District. I'm not a teacher. I work in the district. I just feel like every school is different.
It is.
It
is.
In district, and Broadway is a huge district.
But our responses might be different. But I have to tell you, your response has to be the same no matter where you live. This affects every child in every district. And I've been speaking all over the place. Nobody's telling a different story, folks. In districts that are poorer, they're going to get hammered worse. Special ed kids are going to get hammered worse. ESL kids are going to get hammered worse. So the weakest of our kids are going to get hurt the most. I got to tell you, the measure of who we are as a society is not as how we treat the weakest among us, not how we treat the strongest. And this goes against like everything I've ever believed about what teaching should be and what education should be. We can train our children to get right answers. And this is training that's going on right now. That's not education. We've narrowed the curriculum down to 2 subjects. Children need art, music, phys ed, recess, science. And believe it or not, before this crowd showed up, people got a decent education in New York State. Right? People come from around the world to go to school here. Not because we're doing a lousy job. You got a bunch of rich guys who have the media and had an idea. That's what this is. And the bottom line of the idea is how much money we're going to make. All right? We have to tell them, the people, this is America. If I believe anything, it's the voice of the people has to be heard. It's being heard. Don't be left out of the conversation because our kids, we're the only thing between our kids and this craziness. mean it. I mean it.
Thank God.
Yep. But the ancient Romans used to say was, vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Mary Calamia, clinical social worker and counselor. Long before I had the honor of speaking to Mrs. Calamia on the telephone and when inviting her to the forum, I had read her testimony to the assembly and was deeply concerned and moved by what I read.
I'm going to stand because I'm Italian too. But I need the microphone because it's been a long day. I've been talking to people all day. I've been talking to kids all day. And yeah, I am a licensed clinical social worker. Just off of what Joe Rella said, I called CPS because I'm a mandated reporter. I kept seeing these things coming up saying, CPS, we're going to call CPS if we opt out of the test. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Did anybody call them? So I called them. And the lady I got at CPS actually said, I have kids. I know what the Common Core is. We're not calling anybody. We're not sending anybody to anybody's house. So, okay, just on that, okay. I'm going to open with quotes. 3 quotes from 3 very smart people who got smart without the Common Core. We've all heard of Einstein? Albert Einstein. Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Think about that with the children. Another quote, Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build a strong child than to fix a broken man. The third quote by another smart person who got smart without the Common Core. Me. Common Core is not a national standard. It is a national emergency. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to tell you briefly my story. I'm sitting in my office 2 summers ago. I happen to see a lot of teachers, and it's not because teachers have any more emotional problems than anybody else. I'm a resource for the BOCES EAP. They send me a lot of teachers. And 2 summers ago, I'm in my office, and teachers are coming in, all my elementary school teachers are coming in saying, oh my God, I have to learn 2 new curricula over the summer in math and ELA. And you know, I'm not in the schools, I really don't know what that means to learn 2 new curricula. And I'm not really paying too much mind to it except saying, well, I know it's summer and it sucks, but you gotta learn these 2 new curricula. But I started to see this overwhelming anxiety in my teachers. They were depressed, anxious, they didn't want to go back to school. Usually by the end of August, I'm starting to hear I'm bored, I'm ready to go back, it's time to go to work. They didn't want to go back to school. And they were talking about these manuals that were 6 inches thick, and they had to learn all this new stuff, and all right. So I kind of scratch my head and say, well, good luck, happy September. They go back to school, and September rolls around, and my kids start pouring in, as they often do, bubbling about school, but they're bubbling about they're taking tests in the first week of school. They're taking their final exams. All right, September, I'm looking at my calendar. Why are we taking our final exams? Again, I'm not in the school, so, all right, it seems they must be doing something new. So, all right, September rolls out, October happens. Come October 2012, my phone started ringing like never before. Common Core's been very good for business. I'm starting to get calls from the schools, and it's not unusual for me to get, 2 or 3 or 4 calls in a week with a new child. Maybe 10 to 15 new kids over the course of a year. You have to understand, I'm a 1-girl office, so I can't take them all. If I have an opening, I take the client. If I don't have an opening, I have to move them along. So, maybe 10 to 15 new kids roll in over the course of a year. I was getting calls 10 to 15 in a day at times. Think about that. That's like an entire year's work in a day. And I got curious, what's going on? Schools referring to me, parents, insurance companies. I was getting calls from, accountants. Can you see this client's son? And so I had closed my practice to younger children 10 and under, you know, unless I was really intrigued, I really didn't have the play therapy capabilities anymore in my office. So I was only taking adolescents, and in came a whole bunch of 8th graders, honor students, from 20 different districts. I'm not even talking about this is happening in one school in particular. All of a sudden, I'm getting all these self-mutilators coming into my office. They're burning themselves with cigarettes, they're cutting themselves with razors. One kid had carved the word stupid into her wrist last April after the exams. And I'm like, all right, what's going on here? They weren't coming in and saying, my boyfriend broke up with me, I don't get along with my parents, life sucks. All they were talking about was school. I can't do it, it's too much pressure, I can't take it. Oh my God, I mean, they were out of control with just school, school, school. So the light bulb went off in my head, and I started to put all the pieces together. I talked to my teachers, I talked to my kids, I talked to the parents, and I started doing some research into the Common Core, and I started to look at the standards. And Einstein was right. If you take a fish and judge it by its ability to climb a tree, it's gonna think it's stupid. The Common Core standards are completely developmentally inappropriate. Thank you. I try to explain to people in terms they can understand. So we got a lot of parents here. Everybody's got a kid. You all got a garbage pail in the house too? Okay. How many times do I have to tell you if the garbage pail is full to dump it? How many times do you say that? How many times? Right? Because you got your kid, walks past the pail, oh yeah, it sucks, it's full. Okay. In order to do critical thinking, logic, reason, a child needs a fully developed prefrontal cortex. That's a part of the brain where all abstract thought and deep thinking happens. This part of the brain is not fully developed until early adulthood, usually around the age of 24. So what you're asking a kid to do when you're asking them to do critical thinking, you're asking them to do something that's the fish to climb a tree. I always say it's like asking a fish to fly. Einstein and I were this close. So the kid walks past the garbage pail over and over and over and over again. Now, you could do conditioned learning, and every time that pail is full, you could beat the living daylights out of your kid if you didn't take it out. And conditioned learning, I don't recommend this, by the way, but under conditioned learning, the kid will eventually learn to dump that pail into, because I don't want to get whacked, okay? But even if you did that, the kid is not going to then say, the hamper is full, that's just like the garbage pail. Or the dishwasher is full, that's just like the hamper. They're not capable of then translating that same knowledge, which they would have learned through conditioned learning, to similar ideas. So when they start teaching this abstract thinking, critical thinking, we want them to learn more about less. What we're basically asking them to do is something they can't do that's going to prepare them for absolutely nothing. Your kids are going to come out of school, what was the guy's name? The guy on the video with Sandra Stotsky saying, your kids will be prepared for colleges that most people go to. Thank you, Jason Zimba, one of the architects. Your kids will be prepared to go to one of those schools that most people go to. Is that what you want for your children? While the elites are sending their kids to Montessori schools and preparing them for Harvard, your kids are going to be prepared for remedial math at Suffolk Community College. And they're okay with that, okay? So, Dr. Dodge also talked about our competitiveness, what Common Core, we got to be competitive with China, right? Guess who has the highest youth suicide rate on Earth? China. We had three little girls, about 2 years ago, was doing a homework assignment they couldn't finish. Took a day off from school to complete the assignment, which they still couldn't finish. These girls were 10 and 11 years of age. Joined hands and jumped off a building. Fortunately, they survived, but one little girl actually said, if I'm dead, I don't have to do any more homework. We've had quite a few incidents of successful suicides, again, over homework. In China, if you work for a large corporation, look out your window, there's a net. They put nets around the building to keep their workers from committing suicide. But hey, let's be more like China. You know, we compare ourselves to other countries, you know, where they only send the rich kids to school. Poverty is the biggest indicator of how a kid's going to do in school. Not Common Core standards. You kids are not common, sorry. So, beyond the adolescents coming in self-mutilating, I also started to get a rush of little 8 and 9-year-old kids, 3rd and 4th graders, who were school refusal, anxiety, bedwetting. I heard about nosebleeds, spontaneous nosebleeds, imagine that. Just anxiety through the roof, panic attacks. They didn't want to go to school, separation anxiety, crawling into bed with their parents. So I got intrigued. I started taking these kids in, and I'd ask the parents, you know, I'm not really set up for play therapy. Can your kid handle a 45-minute session? Oh, yeah, no problem. 8-year-olds come in. They come in, they sit on my couch, their feet don't even reach the floor, and for 45 minutes, they can hold a conversation with an adult. Isn't that odd? Without play. How sad, right? So I've been on the floor playing Barbies, and I'm 50, so it's not easy. But they're just, again, the standards, they feel stupid, and they don't want to go to school. I've got 3rd graders telling me I'm done. I don't need any more education. I've learned everything I need to know. And they might have, because the way the standards are, well, it might be. They might have finished. But look, if your kids are doing great, that's great. You know, we always do the, how are the children? If your kids are doing great, that's wonderful. Next year, they're rolling out Common Core Science. Yeah. And next generation, right, next generation science. Yeah, okay. New York, we're number 1. We're going to be the first to do this. And if they're doing good today, they might not be doing so hot tomorrow. I have to tell you, I had a kid who just crashed and burned, was flying high with math, no problem, got a 58 on an exam last week. So, all of a sudden crushed, I'm stupid, oh my God. So keep an eye on them. People ask me constantly, what do I do? What do I do about my child? What are we supposed to do? I have to tell you, I'm at this almost 18 years, almost 19 years working with children. I have never been in a situation where school was the problem like this. I've had kids who were, having trouble in school, didn't want to go to school, or were getting bullied, didn't want to go to school. I've never had a situation where every aspect of school was the problem. So every day we have to send them into that system that is making them sick. And as parents, you have to put them on the bus. You have to drag them out to school, force them, get them to do their homework. It's dividing, it drives a wedge between parent and child. You guys have to be the bad guy. And you have to send them there with your heart in your throat every single day. Those little warriors that have to go in there every single day and face this demon. It's gotta stop. It's gotta stop. So what I say is I suggest a few little exercises, relaxation. I mean, obviously, this is no substitute for a professional evaluation, but I recommend a few exercises, relaxation, visualization exercises, where you get on the floor, even with your kid, lay down with them on a couch, on the floor, on the bed, close your eyes, and go to a healthy place in your head. Build a fantasy, build it with them. Walk them through it, a safe place, a healthy place, a sanctuary in their head. I'm gonna read you in a second. I'm gonna read you a letter from a school principal that I actually along the lines of what Dr. Rella likes to do. But I want to touch on something else, and then I'm going to go back to what to do about your children. For you guys, it's going to be really important that you do something. You need to take action. If you want to do something for your children, you need to take action. It's going to make you feel better, and it's going to show them that you're trying to save them from this. So if there's 2 things and 2 things only that you ever do, one is sign Al Graff's petition, fixnyschools.com. 21, and it's like It's a Wonderful Life. Every time somebody signs a petition, the governor gets an email.
The other thing, the second thing, well, it's Christmas time, you know. The second thing that you need to do, or you should do, or I'm recommending you do, is refuse the tests. If we starve them of the data, the Common Core will crumble. It's all data-driven, and those tests are the key. And the reason why you hear things like, we're going to call CPS on you, is because they're getting scared. The opt-out movement is huge. People ask me all the time, yeah, but what if we're in a sit-and-stare district? Is that going to damage my child for life? I went to Catholic school. I had Sister Mary Hitler. I'm fine, okay? I swear I'm fine. You need to be aware of a very, very basic fact. The testing is not the problem. The testing is a problem. It is not the problem. The Common Core is the problem. And if you start to see certain things on Facebook, like an elected official who posts, I'm really, really against the Common Core, but I haven't signed Al Graff's bill. You know, we got to call them on that, because if they're not going to take action against the Common Core, we got a problem. And we got a huge problem because, as Dr. Rella pointed out today, after hours and hours of hearing Senate testimony, hours of hearing people talking about broken children, broken teachers, a system that doesn't work, standards that are ruining our children. And what does he come up with? We need to do something about the testing. That's it. It's not enough. So I'm going to tell you, I don't care who your senator is, you all got to call John Flanagan. He is the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. He is the guy that's calling the shots in the Senate. And the governor, who treats this whole Common Core thing like, I use the term, pardon me, a flaming bag of dog do, running from it like, oh my God, because it's political suicide to even touch it. I don't care how many times he tells you he has nothing to do with it, he is calling the shots. He has the power to stop it, and he's not stopping it. And this gentleman here, follow the money. Follow the money. They get campaign donations, follow the money. Now, I'm gonna close with this beautiful letter that a principal wrote to the children last year, not in this state, when they were doing their testing, the god-awful testing come springtime. And I'm reading this to you because this is the sentiment you want to convey to your children. If you want to help your children get through this, this is the sentiment you need to convey. He says, we are concerned that these tests do not always assess all of what it is that make you special and unique. The people who create these tests and score them do not know you. Not the way the teachers do, the way I hope to, and certainly not the way your families do. They do not know many of you speak 2 languages, or that you play a musical instrument, or that you can dance and paint a picture. They do not know that your friends count on you to be there for them, or that your laughter can brighten their dreariest day. They do not know you write poetry or songs, play or participate in sports, wonder about the future, or that you sometimes take care of your little brother or sister. They do not know that you have traveled to a really neat place, or that you know how to tell a great story, or that you love spending time with your family. They do not know that you can be trustworthy, kind, and thoughtful, and that you try every day to be your very best. The scores you will tell you something, but they will not tell you everything. There are many, many ways of being smart. Please convey that message to your children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Our next presenter is someone who has been at the forefront of education reform for years. He himself is a former teacher, now assemblyman, with many years of classroom experience. He's also associated with the ever more popular bill, which we've discussed all night, to dismantle Common Core in New York State. Assemblyman Al Graff.
Mary told me I have to stand up because I'm married to an Italian. But anyway, look, I've been traveling all over the state. We've held 10 out of 12 forums. We did one in Suffolk, we did one in Nassau. And just to let you know, we did the forums a little differently. Basically, what our forums were a conversation. And we were interested in listening to teachers and listening to parents. And what we wanted to know was, how is this affecting your child? How is it affecting your home? How is it affecting your classroom? And how is it affecting your school? And, I mean, if you have to sum up, and no matter where we went, we did one in Suffolk, we did one in Nassau, we did one in Staten Island, we did one in Wapatos Falls, we did one in Rochester, we did another one in Syracuse, we did another one in Buffalo. Last week we were in the North Country, then we went to Watertown. We were, I'm losing track, we were in Corning. Right. We're going to Troy next week. And then we have another one as west as you can go in New York. And if I can sum up what I've heard from parents, educators, administrators, if I could really sum it up, what it would be is, help us. You're hurting our kids. Stop it, all right? And nobody's listening to us. What I can say to you now is, we started this, I've been living this with a lot of people up on this dais for the last 6 months. And in the beginning, it was a battle uphill. But you know what? You're on the cusp here. You're on the cusp of really getting rid of this. They're starting to listen. They have to listen, right? But understand that the governor's State of the State address is coming up. And that's the target right there. And the target is to go after the governor. The governor sits there and tells you that I have nothing to do with education. If anybody in this room believes that, please come up to me after this. I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. Cheap, slightly used. Okay? So, and for your information, when he started saying that, I have Doug in my office, and Doug's very good on the computer. I usually tell him what I want to get done, and Doug can come up with it. So we put Cuomo's face on Waldo. And instead of where's Waldo, it's where's Cuomo. And on here, we have his address so you can write him a letter. We have his phone number so you can call him. We have his fax number. We have his email. We have his Twitter. We have his Facebook. So trust me, reach out and touch the governor for Christmas, okay? And I don't know if you remember, but he also said that he was going to be the lobbyist for children. Okay? How'd that work out? You know? So, for your information, in the back, you'll see the thing with all the information to call the governor. Then what you'll see is a copy of the bill. We have a bill here, actually, to withdraw from Common Core and race to the top. After that, and after a lot of conversation, and listening to people throughout the state, I had another bill drafted, I just got it back today. And what it does is, right now, the regions are actually appointed by one branch of government, by the Assembly majority. There are 13 regions, and there are 4 regions at large. So I got tired of listening about where did these people come from. Understand that the regions, out of 17 regions, the answer that I've got is, I think 3 or 4 actually taught in the classroom, out of 17. I don't think it's too much to ask that people have a background in education. I don't think it's too much to ask that the chairperson for the Education Committee in the Assembly have a degree or have experience in education. Our present chairwoman has a degree in political science. I don't think it's too much to ask that people that are working for the committee, that are helping write policies for the schools, have some background in education. Anybody here think this is too much to ask? So these are some of the things that you have to express. The other thing that I'll tell you too is, in each one, how many teachers do we have? Okay, you know what? And I guarantee you there's a couple more teachers in the room. When did it become embarrassing to say I'm a teacher? Okay? When did it get to that point?
When did we start attacking teachers? When did we start attacking teachers? I'd love to know what
When
happened.
did Cuomo get elected? 2011. Look, the bottom line is, the other thing too that I see out here is fear. And I'll give a lot of credit to some teachers, because we've been out here doing these forums, we've had teachers come up, sit down, and the first thing they said to us was, I'm putting my job in jeopardy, okay? And I'm afraid to speak, but I'm not gonna sit here anymore, because this is abusive to the kids that I'm charged with. And when I say my kids, it's not only my kids at home, it's my kids in the classroom. And you know what? I'm an ex-Brooklyn cop. I worked in East New York. I've seen people shot. I've seen people in horrific accidents and everything else. Some of the stories that I heard from teachers and parents close to brought tears to my eyes. And one I'll give you is a special ed teacher. Had 9 kids taking the test. And this is on YouTube. What happens is with the special ed, there's an amount of, do we have any special ed teachers in? All right, there's trust that you have to form with your students, and you guide them. Well, with these tests, their IEPs went out the window. And they weren't allowed to help these, and the kids would look at them just with their eyes, almost in tears, asking them, you know, to help, and they had to say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to. And this one teacher, she sat there, and there was this little boy. And understand, 90 minutes of tests for 3 days they had these kids going through. And there was a little boy, and she noticed that he wasn't writing on the paper. And she walked over to him. He was stabbing himself with a pencil. Okay? She took the pencil away, and she said, that's when I felt like a teacher again, and not just an administrator of a test. So, you know, I'm looking at this. I've looked at the curriculum. I've listened to people. I don't think that the curriculum is age appropriate. I don't think it's developmentally appropriate. My degree is for elementary education in Plattsburgh. So I went to SUNY Plattsburgh for education. I was taught that the purpose of a test was not to test the children, it was to test me, and to see if I was getting that information through to the child. And what happened, if too many of the kids failed my test, it meant that I didn't do my job in teaching them this information, so I had to go back and reteach it. Right? When you have 70% of these kids failing, it's not the kids, it's the test. The other thing there is no rubric here for kids with disabilities. Okay? So what they're doing is they say every kid should be here. And if you have a special education student who has a developmental disability, they're going to be, the best they're going to be is here. They're never going to be here. Okay? And what you're going to do is the way that they're presenting this, it's like a script. You're going to leave those children behind. Okay? So basically, from day one, it's you sit in the corner and we're going to water you once in a while. All right? The same thing with advanced learners. So an advanced learner, they want everybody here. If an advanced learner is here, they're going to bring them back down to the average. This is not what education's about. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. Now, here's a question I ask everybody, because I looked at the curriculum. If you go into Engage New York and you look at the ELAs, can anyone here please tell me why a first grader has to be able to point out ancient Mesopotamia on a map or a globe and explain the contributions that ancient Mesopotamia has made on modern day civilization. There's 6, okay? There's 6, really? And if you look, and has anybody here dealt with the math problems? Parents, how many hours of homework do we get a night? I get 2, 4. Has anybody looked at the math problems? Does anybody understand the math problems? We have an assemblyman who teaches college level math. He looked at it and said, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about. Okay? Have you seen some of the books that they're giving for 5th grade? About a little girl whose parents were killed in Iraq, right? 3rd grade? Sorry. We have people that are serving overseas. Okay? They have the Taliban there with guns, right? Her trying to sneak away to school. Anybody think this is appropriate? No. Anybody think? No. There's another book, what is it, Long Walk to the River?
Long walk to water.
To water? Sorry. It's about, what, 1/4 of an inch thick?
Yeah.
And it's 5 months that you have to spend on that book?
Still reading it.
Right. Because of the curriculum.
Because every 1/4 inch of writing, he has to make the notes on, and every single thing he's writing.
Right. And you know what? I'm meeting teachers out there whose school districts are telling you have to do it exactly how they're telling you to do it. And if you look at some of the modules, they don't even edit it. It'll say pick out the numbers, and there are no numbers. It's grammatically incorrect. Right? There's errors all over. I have teachers that are handing out things in the class, and they go, okay, let's talk about this. And they go, this makes no sense. And she looks at it, she goes, you're right, forget that one. Let's try this one. We're paying for this, okay? And I heard today that what we want to do, one of the recommendations, was we're missing modules. Let's get all the modules in. Well, the ones we have are garbage. Why do we want more? Look. All I'm saying, we need to stop. We need to put the brakes on here. You know, if you look at, if it's supposed to be a guideline, let it be a guideline. But you know what? Let's bring the teachers in. Let's bring the special education people. Let's bring the mental health professionals. Let's bring the people that are actually, that are on the front line to actually write a curriculum that's age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, and it's not going to cause this much stress and aggravation in the households and on our children. What I can tell you is, look, when I taught, I remember teaching, and I had a kid that didn't know how to do the 9s times table, okay? And I taught him to do it on his fingers. And it was like I gave him the key to the city. And if anybody's ever taught a child, you can be a parent and teach a child. And if you're trying to teach them a concept, all of a sudden you can see it in their eye when it clicks. Have you ever seen that? Yeah. All right. I remember the funniest thing was when I did my student teaching, you know, after being on the police department, I went to school later. And when I did my student teaching, they put me in kindergarten. And I looked at them. I said, do I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger? But the one thing about kindergarten, okay, every 5 minutes that light went on because everything was new, okay? We were concentrating on having them write from left to right, having them form letters, having them have social interplay with other children, learning social skills, okay? Kindergarten was a place where you wanted these kids to start enjoying school, to look forward to going to school, okay? This is wiping that out. So look, I've been fighting this battle for a long time. As a matter of fact, I had one of my colleagues ask me, who started my car in Albany in the morning? And I looked at him, I said, why are you looking for a job? And he said, no. But what I need from you, and the help that I need from you, get online, sign the petition, reach out, touch the governor, okay? And trust me, just keep bombarding him. Do whatever you can. Don't just do one. Write him a letter. Send him an email. Send him a fax. If you got a carrier pigeon, I'll take it. You know? Whatever you can do, keep the pressure on him. I believe January 8th is the State of the State address. And all I can say to you is little Mario is up for election this year too. So let him know, right? But the bottom line is this has got to come to an end. The brakes have got to go on. We have to put educators in the room. And you know what? I think we need parents in the room too. But we need all the stakeholders to be involved because they left all of these people out. All right? So, look, I want to thank everybody for coming here because if this wasn't a concern of yours, you wouldn't be here. You know, what I can say, if you're interested in looking at the forums, they're all on the internet. Go take a look. But I think what has to happen now, and by the way, we have legislator Tom Selmy here with us tonight. And we have Claudia Tantone, who's here for Senator Boyd. And she's here gathering information to tell Phil, trust me, I'll talk to Phil. You know, but like I said, pick up the papers in the back, make the phone calls, right? And, you know, go on your Facebook. How many people are on Facebook here? How many people signed my petition? How many people are going to sign the petition tomorrow? Good. Do me a favor. Share this with all your contacts. Share it with all your emails. Right? Put it out there as much as you can. Right now, I checked, it's 20,556 signatures. These are letters that go to the governor. What I can tell you is they got upset, okay, when I did plug Long Island in for the electricity, and they got, I think it was 600 emails. They were kind of upset with that, saying you're blowing up my email, okay? And I said, tomorrow I'll go out and tell more people to sign. But now he's got over 20,000, going up to 21,000. So lastly, I'll leave you with this. You know what? We get out here, we talk, I guess we're the faces of this. Right, we're the ones out front. But this is not our movement. This is a mommy-led movement. This is a parent-led movement. And one thing people are starting to learn is something that I learned a long time ago in my household. If mommy's not happy, nobody's happy. If daddy's not happy, who cares? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown.
Assembly member, just a quick question. From a legislative process point of view, what is it going to take to get this bill to the floor to get it voted on?
What it's going to do, okay. Understand that when we put this bill in, right, in June, the whole purpose of this is nobody was talking about this. Nobody wanted to deal with it. They just wanted it to go away. They figured it would get implemented. After a while, people would get used to it, right? And nobody would say a word. So the idea behind this bill was to start a conversation. We started one hell of a conversation throughout the whole state.
Yep.
All right? Now what can happen here is, and I tell people all the time, Albany is one of the most partisan places you've ever seen in your life, okay? And this is what you'll see. In order to get a bill passed, and everybody understands it's got to pass the Senate, it's got to pass the Assembly, and it's got to be signed by the governor. So what happens is the majority in the Senate are the Republicans. So you have to have a Republican sponsor in the Senate. And you have to have a majority sponsor in the Assembly, okay? Now, right now, I have this bill. I'm in the minority. But that puts me in a position like Monty Hall. Let's make a deal. So if I can get a Republican to sponsor it in the Senate, I will gladly hand it over to a Democrat in the Assembly and let him put his name on it and submit the bill. This should not be about politics, okay? This shouldn't be a Republican issue. It shouldn't be a Democratic issue. This is an issue about our children, okay? And there's an old saying by Harry Truman, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't care who gets the credit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Graff. And now our local assemblyman who is sponsoring Mr. Graff's bill from District 7, Mr. Andrew Garbarino.
I'm lucky enough to go last night. After following these people, there's not much more I can say. I'm not a teacher. I don't have an education degree. I'm not a psychologist. I've never really done much with helping. The only thing I've done with schools is I was a student once, Sable High School, went to Sable schools. You know, I'm an attorney. You know, I think I have common sense. You know, when I first got elected, I've been in office less than a year now. When I first got elected, people explained Common Core to me. They, you know, it sounded like a great idea. The idea behind Common Core, prepare our students for a career in college. Hell, who could be against that? That makes sense. What doesn't make sense to me is the way they implement it. How do you go to a 5th grader and say, last 5 years we've been teaching you this way, you've been learning this way, we're going to, forget that, we're going to try something completely different. How do you go to a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years, who we've trusted to teach our children for 30 years and say, you've been doing this way for 30 years, forget that, we're going to try something new. That doesn't make sense to me. That's why I'm on Al Graff's bill. That's why I'm co-sponsoring it with Al Graff. The only way to fix Common Core is to stop it now, because the way this implementation has started, it's just, I've been in office for less than a year. 90% of probably the calls to my office or the emails have been from probably half of you about what this is doing. I was on the phone with somebody the other day for a half an hour about some gentleman who's from Patchogue trying to help his kid do his math homework. I couldn't even figure it. It is when well-educated adults can't figure out what a 3rd grader's math problem is, there's something wrong. Dr. Rella, when Dr. Rella said something before, and it really stuck with me, we are at a tipping point. I wanted to hit this. We're at a tipping point. Because if we don't fix this now, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop until the people who are pushing on us realize, oh my God, we've made a mistake. And the years that takes, it's already going to be too late. The kids who've been learning now are going to, they're going to lose their whole child, the education, it's all going to be messed up, and we can't allow that to happen. We have a lot of sponsors in the Assembly on the bill, but the big thing is you guys. We need you to contact the senators. We need you to contact your assemblyman. Oh, that's me, but I'm already on it. Other assemblymen, we need to make sure, we need you to contact the governor. He needs to know that this is a big issue. He is running, Al said it, he's running for re-election. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is about the kids. We need to make sure that they are protected. We need to make sure that, 30 years from now, when we're all old and, we're enjoying our retirement, that they're here, making sure that the country's moving. I'm not going to speak much longer, but I did want to just say, I find it.
I said 30 years from now, when he's old and I'm dead.
That's why we have these kids. They're all going to be keeping us alive a lot longer, so that's good. I just find, one final point I want to make. I find it funny that all the people, all the smart millionaires and billionaires pushing this, Bill Gates, all these guys, none of them had Common Core, and they all seem to turn out pretty well, huh? that's something we should tell them. You didn't need it, neither do we.
Right.
So, make sure you contact as many as you people can, sign on to Algraph's Facebook page, his petition. There's strength in numbers, and right now we have the numbers, so. Are we gonna take questions, or?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna be finished, but, please stay and ask questions, everybody, and I really appreciate you all coming out, because this just shows that this is such an important issue. Thank you.
I travel a lot. I've been to most developed countries on the planet and quite a few of the underdeveloped countries. And to compare us to China is not fair. I'm not saying we should compare ourselves to China. We are the greatest nation in the world because of our society, because of our teachers, because of our thinking. But we're not even close to China. China's like comparing us to Africa, and that's not a fair assessment. I don't think we should be like China. I think if they got closer to where we are, we got closer to where they are, that would be a perfect medium. And to say that we want to be like them is just wrong. And it's unfair. Because I've been trying to educate I'm up to grade 3 with the course, because when I first read it, I said, what am I going to do with my kids? I'm going to start reading now and figure out what I'm going to do with my kids, because when my kids graduate, I want them to be the most prepared they could possibly be for the rest of their lives. That's my job as a parent, to get these kids ready to go out and enter the real world. And it's not popular, but it's my rule. And right now, I feel if my kids are going to go to school, I lost my train of thought, but they're going to be prepared. And who do I want to prepare them? I want to know who's hiring them. Where are these jobs? Most of the people, or my clients, outsource. So they think it's a global industry. Everything has changed. We don't need to pick our workforce from whatever country you live in, and we need to be prepared for that.
Can I answer that for a second?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I still want a sense of which way I'm going.
Look, as far as education, okay, as far as where the state has been going with education, just to answer some of your question there. Even before the Common Core controversy, right, when I first got to Albany, which was 2.5 years ago, the commissioner came in front of me, and I had the graduation rates throughout the entire state. And what it showed was the graduation rates were deplorable. I mean,
Where is this?
throughout the state, the numbers for the states. Now on Long Island, they're pretty good. They're like 94, 90 to 98%. Well, let me ask you something. If it's 98%, right, what was broken? No, but what was broken if 98% of our kids were graduating high school? Now hold on. The other thing is once New York State got involved with education, they screwed it all up. All right. Now, when I went to school, right, we had a choice. And one of the things that I said is when I looked at the graduation rates, and when you had in low needs and moderate needs schools, the graduation rate was 73% throughout the entire state. That means 3 out of 10 students were dropping out. High needs schools, it was 62%, which meant 4 out of 10 students was dropping out. And what I said is I blame the state for this, because once they got involved in education, they screwed it all up. When I went to school, we had an option between a Regents and a general diploma. And as much as we want all our kids to be nuclear physicists, that's not going to happen. We've decimated our BOCES programs, okay? And the bottom line is, there's nothing wrong with being an electrician or a plumber. Have you paid one lately? So, I mean, we have to look at all of education, see what's working, what's not working. And you know what? When I went to school, we had wood shops, we had electrical shops, we had automotive shops, we had, they had secretarial courses. My sister-in-law graduated her LPN. She's been working ever since. And now there are modern jobs that we can use for that. But Common Core, you're knocking all of that out too, because every kid's got to be right here and that's it. So some kids should have the option of going for a general diploma, either Regents or a general, should have the option of a career track or an education track. And Common Core is not going to allow that. The other thing too is whether your kids have, say your child has a learning disability, okay? Common Core makes no allowances for kids with a learning disability. They don't do that, okay? So the bottom line, and you know, when you're teaching kids with a learning disability, look, sometimes here's the level, right? They may be here. If you can get them to here, that's a great success depending on the learning disability that they have. So what I'm saying to you is, and the other thing it doesn't take into account, if you have how many teachers we have? Okay, and you can agree or disagree with this statement, but and Dr. Ella, what I was taught is to teach in a classroom, you teach to the middle of the class. Then you may give seat work to reinforce what you taught. Then what happens is if you have kids who are a little advanced, you give them a little tougher work to do, just to keep them engaged, to keep them interested so they're not bored. But that gives you an opportunity to work with the kids that didn't get it, okay, maybe didn't get the concept. And everybody learns in a different way. Some are textual, you know, they might have to write it down. Others, it's auditory, they have to hear it a lot. And other people, it's visual, they have to just see it. So if you have index cards, you go, this doesn't allow for that. This is a one-size-fits-all.
It really is. That's the issue. And you're going to discover it yourself. You know, the reason you're coming into a forum that is not extolling the virtues is we've taken a hard look at this for every kid. Now, I understand you're just concerned about yours, but a one-size-fits-all model doesn't work anywhere. It doesn't. What Al's talking about in terms of differentiating the instruction in a classroom is what has to happen in a classroom. Every child is different in there.
My daughter's in first grade right now. Last year she was in kindergarten. She was in a non-Common Core school. She was doing first grade math in kindergarten. She took the Iowas last year, not reading, scored 50% in first grade math. This year she's in Common Core math, struggling. And another, just to add on your international example, we were thinking about moving to the UK. We were in the UK over the summer. She interviewed at 4 schools. She was, from a math perspective, right on target with her age group in those schools. Reading, she was behind. If we go back there this year and interview, I am certain that she would be behind in both reading and math. So it's...
We're close with you, regardless of that.
All right, but the other thing too you're not looking at is getting back to the economic part of it. Is look, you know, I don't know what your financial resources are, but if I'm sitting there and my children, first off, my children, if they come home with their homework, when they came home, because my children are older, I'd have textbooks. So if I didn't understand something and they were having trouble with it, I can go into the textbook, I can figure it out and help my child. There are no textbooks. There are no instructions for the parents. Number 2, if you have somebody that comes, say you have a single parent household and they're working, well, let me digress a little bit. So now, say that I couldn't help my child with something, I couldn't figure it out, okay? I would take the money to pay a tutor to make sure that my child wasn't left behind, which I'm sure you would do, right?
Well, if I
Also,
can figure it out, you have to go to extra help. I don't know what it would be, but...
would you hire a tutor if you had the resources?
Sure.
Okay. Well, if you have a single parent household, all right, where the parent is working, say 2 or 3 jobs, to keep the roof over their head, keep the lights on, and put food on the table. Sometimes education, as much as they want it to be a priority, they're not in an economic position where it is a priority. And they don't have the resources to supplement what the child is getting at school. So now when you're looking at, you ever hear the haves and the haves not? Okay, you're going to widen that gap for the haves and haves not, because what's happening is, under this, a lot of this is scripted, okay? And it's scripted so much where the teachers are told you'll teach 5 minutes of this, hand them this, give them 10 minutes to do that, okay? Say this over again for 5 minutes, right? And basically that's the class. So they can't go and help that struggling student. So, and if a kid's got a learning disability, he's done. She's done. And these all lessons are building blocks. So if I'm teaching you like 1 + 1 = 2, and then I keep building on that, and then I'm adding 10 + 20 = 30, as I'm building, if you don't get that bottom building block, you are never going to move up to the top. You're going to be left behind forever. Okay? So understand that education, we've been educating students for a long time. And teachers have molded their lesson plans. Teachers have done creative things in order for kids to learn, right? I don't know of one teacher that doesn't want every one of their students to excel, okay? This doesn't give you the opportunity to do that, okay? If you're looking at words on a paper, but you're not looking at the environment of a classroom that's out there. You're not looking at an inclusion classroom where a teacher has kids with disabilities, kids with IEPs. And the bottom line is, under this too, there's IEPs, a lot of them are being ignored. Okay? If I could, I'll give it to you. If I could actually put together a plan, okay, to really screw up the education in New York, this would be it.
Talking about for years, and people who know me in this community will know that I've said this at Board of Ed meetings here in East Islip. The current graduation rate in the United States of America hovers in the vicinity of 65%, which is abysmal considering what this country is. So to what you are saying, and this is what I think I'm hearing from you, that is disgusting to me. Absolutely. And I've said that, and I think some of you have heard me say that. I get up and I speak and I go, are you kidding me? This is the United States. 65% is unacceptable. 65% is a good graduation rate in Tripoli, not in the United States. So when I thought about Common Core, I'm like, okay, standards, okay? But I am an inclusion teacher in a 6th grade classroom. And I'm telling you, we get these we've mapped the curriculum for the year, and I've been told that by next Friday, I'm going to complete Unit 2. I spent 40 minutes today with a group of 6th graders. In my classroom, I have 12 languages, 26 languages in my buildings, 12 languages in my classroom, and I'm trying to teach, I have 9 classified children in my ICT, 30 children. I picked up 15 today to try to teach them how to write a thesis statement. After 40 minutes, when the light went completely flat, we played a vocabulary game because you know what? They need to learn how to speak English before they can even conceive of a thesis statement. Let's play Pictionary with your current vocabulary words. Now, to be honest with you, if someone came flying by my classroom at around 1:30 this afternoon, I probably would have been hung out to dry on Queens Boulevard. But the light was done. The light was completely extinguished, and I had 15 kids looking at me like, how much longer do I have to stay here? And how much more do you want to kill me today? So we played Pictionary, okay? And I know that the graduation rate sucks, but my kids need to learn how to speak English before they can write this.
Go ahead.
Common Core is a problem. It's a big problem. But this problem started before Common Core. Albany is underfunding schools, okay? They brought these schools to near bankruptcy, and then Obama came in with the carrot, which is called Race to the Top. So of course, like the conditioning, okay, let's jump up for the money, because we're desperate. We can't afford the program for the special needs kids, for the kids that are excelling. That's the problem. It's all money. Like you said, follow the money. Well, the money is not going to the kids in school to educate them. Okay? And there's kids in school in poverty. I work in a district where 24% of kids get free lunch. Okay? This is the problem. So Albany needs to undo Common Core, but Albany needs to put their money where their mouth is and fund our schools like they did 10, 15 years ago. And that's all I have to say.
Also, just for this gentleman here to go back to we don't learn conceptually in 3rd grade or 8 years old in elementary school. We don't learn conceptually We learned by rote, and there's a reason we all learned by rote. I have a master's degree, I didn't have Common Core. We learn by rote, and then later on, as the brain chemistry changes and our brains are able to deal with concepts, you know, can anybody who went to college or even in high school remember sitting in their seat and saying, that's why such and such from third grade, now it all makes sense. We learn, they're teaching it backwards. We're learning concepts ahead of information, and that is just not how we learn.
Now, I've been teaching for 33 years. Thank God I retired last June. I don't have to teach Common Core. But I have 9 permanent state certifications, and I was teaching last year social studies. Kids hated it. They hated the history. That's because they didn't know the geography. So once you do geography, then they love the history. But they don't teach that anymore, and it certainly isn't in Common Core.
Right. Well, supposedly, every other subject you'll learn by reading about it. Science is not a good way to, that's not a great way to learn science. Doing science is the way to do it. This thing, there's too much wrong with it. You know, it's like you're trying to fix something that has a chance of being fixed. You have to stop it. And the reason is because while we're sitting here, kids are still getting hurt. There's nothing else to talk about as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have any suggestions? Because I commend you wholeheartedly how to get district administration and teachers feeling comfortable with speaking up just a little bit.
Every district is different, but I'll tell you in my district, if 5 people show up at a board meeting and they have a complaint, I'll say I'll certainly look into that. If 150 people show up, we stop the board meeting and we listen to them. It's numbers. Numbers matter. They matter with the legislature. They matter in school districts. School district is just local government, nothing else. And if you want something done, show up. Show up.
If you ask a legislator if you want to get something done, okay, you can do civil disobedience, you can do protests, you can do phone calls, letters. What is your legislator going to say to you? What's the number one thing that works? Is what? Being contacted. Letters, emails, phone calls. You
When I
have
talked
to.
My senators in the summer, they said, how many emails did you get? How many? How many phone calls did you get? It is.
And you don't need too many at the local level, like at the school board level.
Yeah.
You don't need to have too many people contact people.
How much does your school boardroom hold? Mine holds about 150 comfortably. 200 people show up? The end of the world. I know. No, but I'm saying, they do. I didn't reappoint the lacrosse coach. I had 200 people in the boardroom. But this is at least as important as that. So I think if you can get people, and then people will listen. Well, and every district has a different culture, and you know, we meet regularly. Superintendents. I'm Northern Brookhaven, from Brookhaven town. So that we need, and everybody is trying to navigate their way through this thing. No one's disagreeing with what needs to happen. It depends on your community. It depends on the school board in your community. And you know, one of my predecessors at Comslog said, communities get the school boards they deserve. The communities get the superintendents they deserve. Because if you don't like me, I'm out. But if nobody complains, if you're only complaining to yourselves, you know, you go walk in the backyard and talk to yourself.
The votes on bills, you can look at any bill. If you have a bill number, you can vote. You can look on the Assembly website what the vote was. Do they record the region votes? Yeah. Or is it a voice? I'm trying to remember if it's a voice vote, but I'm trying to remember.
The Regents can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a voice vote.
It's a voice vote, okay.
Yeah, and we will get up, and if we're not going to vote, can't hear me?
I think it-
I can hear you, I'm sorry, I'm talking to her.
It's a voice vote. I don't know if you heard me before, I have a bill coming now that would actually, you would collect your region.
Right. Could you share a little more info on that, the name, the number of it?
Well, I just got it today.
There's a handout right back there.
There's a handout
Has the whole thing on it.
There's not a number, I just got it today.
Take mine.
I've got one here, I'll give it to you. Basically what happens right now, regions, there are 13 regions, one from each judicial district throughout the state. Then there are 4 regions at large, okay? And what happens is they're appointed, they're interviewed and appointed by the majority in the assembly.
Right.
Okay? The Senate, you'll see them, they boycotted. They do not even come on the floor of the assembly. You'll see a bunch of empty seats with the senators' names on it, but because of the process, they won't even come and recognize it. So this bill, what it does is it says, no, there will be 13 regions that will be elected to a 4-year term, one from each judicial district. Then what would happen is the chancellor would be chosen by the 13 elected regions from one of the regions. So what you would actually have is an elected position. So that way there, people have an opportunity to vote for their own region and direct the education of their children. Because right now, you know what? It's a rubber stamp. You only have one portion of one house of state government that's appointing the regions. I don't know about you, I think there's a problem.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then just to really clarify, the New York State Board of Regents is 100% wholly responsible for the education, the layout and the curriculum choice of New York State. That body is the body.
Look, understand something. The other thing too is the regions, the purse strings are held by the governor and held by the 2 legislative branches, okay? That's a big incentive to get the regions to do things, right? And you know, you have to understand, a lot of this, like when the governor says that he has nothing to do with this, that's utter nonsense.
Right.
Okay, he stood there and said how he was going to be the lobbyist for children. But at the same time, you know, for him to sit there and try to hide from this issue, okay, is pure cowardice on his part.
Is there a strategy to just defund it, much like there is strategy on federal level for legislation that people find objectionable to, which strangely enough, some, even though they say they're against this legislation, they don't use the strategy of defunding it? Is the legislature, are there bills introduced to defund Common Core and just say we're not going to fund it?
Well, that's the bill that I have.
Okay.
The bill that I have is to withdraw from Common Core, to withdraw from Race to the Top. And understand, when we were talking about the numbers before with the $700 million, they didn't actually get $700 million, they got $500 million. And out of that $500 million, a lot of that stayed in Albany, okay? It didn't go down to the schools. And basically what it did was offset the state's portion of the education, you know, education money. And what they did was pass the mandates once again down to the schools, okay? But understand that if we were to withdraw from this, my understanding is we just wouldn't get the other $200 million, all right? But this is going to cost us over $1 billion to implement. So if it's $1 billion, hey, we just saved $800 million. Okay? So, look, what it comes down to here is if enough pressure is put on this governor, if enough pressure is put on the elected officials of the state, they have to deal with this issue. And the governor has the biggest bully pulpit, right, in the state. And understand that with his one budget with the schools, when he wanted APPR, right, the one thing I laugh about is they said, well, this, you know, the union accepted this, the teachers union. And I mean, you can look, there's a debate on, I mean, I'm debating that on the floor of the assembly. And one of the things I said is, yeah, right, they accepted it, but you held a gun to their head.
Yep.
And they told them, if you don't do this, we're going to pull your funding. Okay? And what's happening now throughout the state, and Dr. Ella and everybody else was right, I mean, all they're doing is, you know, when you're losing an argument, all right, you may resort to threats. And why these teachers are afraid to come out and speak to us, because they have their own families that they have to support. And why superintendents are stopping these teachers from coming out and talking, okay, is that they're afraid that the governor will cut their school funding. Okay, so there's always that threat out there. And you know what? And the people that I respect the most, whether it's teachers that came out to my forums and sat there and said, I'm putting my job on the line here, but I'm not willing to let them sit there and hurt my kids anymore. You know what? That should tell you a lot right there. When a person puts the well-being of his family, okay, right, to the back to advocate for kids, and there's, you know, I mean, nobody deserves more respect than a person that will bend down to help a child. But this is corrosive, and I'm going to tell you that right now, and people have to stand up. Is that it? Anything
Yeah,
else?
well, it's getting late, and I'm sure there are other people in there, so I want to say thank you very much.
All right, yeah, anybody else?
Can I make one point, Assemblyman Graff? I just want to make a point with regards to the Catholic schools. If you're thinking about perhaps pulling your children out of public school and going to the Catholic school way, the New York Archdiocese has adopted Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative. So Cardinal Dolan is giving his blessings to Common Core state standards. So that's not an option. I just want to let everyone know if that's what you're thinking. New York Archdiocese is completely on board. And we're working on Superintendent McNiff, who is the superintendent for the New York Archdiocese. So this not only touches public school, also a Catholic school as well. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well, I was gonna bring this up, but since you touched upon that, what are your thoughts about homeschooling? Because New York State is one of the most restrictive on parents or you know, guardians homeschooling their own children outside of a government school, and I was wondering, there's some ambiguity of whether or not the New York State mandates what curricula and whether Common Core will go into that, you know, with homeschoolers.
Okay, I'm not a homeschooler, but I can tell you we have lots of homeschooling parents on our Facebook page, and there are ways around it. There are lots of books that are not Common Core aligned. Right now, the homeschoolers are going to be the last ones to be affected, okay? One thing I didn't make a point about David Coleman, who we know who was one of the lead architects for Common Core State Standards Initiative. He is now the president of the College Board, and there's a reason why he's the president of the College Board. It's because he's aligning Common Core State Standards to the SATs and ACTs. So with regards to homeschoolers, they will be affected if this continues at some point. Right now, they're not affected. They are going to be the last ones to be affected if we don't literally behead this monster, because it's going to affect all schools. Because now you're going to get the competition where you're going to have the Catholics, you have the public school, you have the private schools, and you have the homeschoolers. And don't forget, Pearson has a monopoly on all the textbooks. Okay, so who's to say that if you have, like, say, a Holy Child, where I live, is it's an independent school, or Hackley, let's say, for example, and it's time for new books, they need new books. Well, who has a monopoly? Pearson, and guess what it's aligned to? Common Core. So I don't have any proof of this. This is just a theory I have. But who's to say that New York State is not going to come in and say, well, you know what? If you want to be accredited, guess what? You haven't aligned yet to Common Core State Standards. So the Common Core State Standards, one of the goals is to eliminate school choice. That is one of the goals. Don't kid yourself. That is one of the goals. Common Core State Standards also, like I said, was imported from Europe. My husband was born and raised in Europe, and he went through the same education model. Okay? Only difference is when my husband was in school, he needed to decide what track he was going to go on in 8th grade. Okay? Here they want to do it in 5th grade. They want to groom our children for a managed workforce economy according to the corporation's needs and desires. That's it. That's one of the ultimate goals of Common Core, quite frankly, is to have a managed workforce economy according to the corporation's needs.
Yeah, well, what I would say to that is that's nothing new. I mean, through all of human history and you trace through Western culture, it's about the elite. The question is how to manage human resources. How do you manage the masses? How do you keep power, whether it be the aristocracy or now, they don't call themselves the aristocracy because people would catch on. But how do you manage human resources is the real question. And the elite get one type of education. So Mr. Cuomo's 3 daughters, they go to a private Northeast school, or Mr. King's children go to a Montessori school, or Mrs. Tish's children, and she taught at a Hebrew school. And you trace back that all these people on the, quote, the Republican side or the Democratic side, which is a false dilemma, false dialectic in certain ways. But they all send their kids to non-public government schools. They send them to private schools that give a child, an individual, a complete and coherent education, whereas people in government schools and Common Core is just really intensity is incoherency. But thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Calamia is on her way out, and I would just like to thank all of our speakers tonight, Dr. Vella, Assemblyman Garbarino, Assemblyman Albrecht, Yvonne Gasparino, and thank you to all of you for coming. And I hope that this is just the beginning of a renewed fight for all of us. Thank you.